So I'm Caroline. I'm the founder of 50inTech. We connect women in tech to community peers, investors, and companies to close the gender gap in tech. I will not give you the number, but you know about it. We have a big issue in the tech industry, and we are supporting strongly women entrepreneurs and all the women who are working in the tech industry. Today, we are here to talk with this special session in partnership with Microsoft for Startup about sales and enterprise sales. You know that we are in a special moment due to the COVID situation. We as an entrepreneur are all struggling with the same issues, adapting or not our go-to-market strategy, continue to sell our product, or even pivoting, cutting costs, but making sure that that the takeover will be possible. Whether you are in B2C or B2B sales, an economic crisis brings a level of uncertainty that impacts how business operates. For example, companies have to scale back operation, employees fear losing their jobs, impacting company culture, less revenue is generating, impacting growth plan. As a founder or sales leader, understanding how a company thinks during an economic crisis is a competitive advantage and something really essential to survive. We are now slowly coming back to a new normal, and it's time to ask ourselves the right question to make sure we make the best decision and put as much chance as possible to survive the crisis. So we are here to talk about strategies today, but also giving you actionable advice about the channel strategy that you can really activate. And to answer your question, we are really pleased to welcome two exceptional guests today. Amali the Alwis, Managing Director of Microsoft for Startup UK, and Caroline Egan, CEO of Inspiring. So I will give you the voice. First, Amali, we want to know everything about you. I think you was like a former entrepreneur. Can you tell a little bit more about yourself, please?
Yes, I am. I am, for my sins, a former entrepreneur as well. So sort of very much sort of empathize with, you know, what it's a really tough time for a lot of startups. So my last company before I joined Microsoft was actually a company called Code First Girls, who, similar to 50inTech, is about supporting diversity in the tech industry. So we ran coding courses, we did advisory work, we ran training programs with large corporates, large enterprises. And I have been sort of thinking, as we've been going through these situations, you know, if I was still at Code First Girls, what would I be going through? And, you know, it's a tough time. So, you know, it's fantastic to be able to share a little bit more, and obviously, hopefully share some of those points around sort of, I guess, you know, working with enterprise clients, both from, you know, both sides of the fence, but very happy to share more about, obviously, Microsoft for Startups on that side as well.
Thank you very much, Amali. And Caroline, you are the expert about all the channel strategies today, so we will listen to you and all your amazing advice. Can you tell us a little bit more about you?
Yes, of course. So good afternoon, everyone. So yes, Caroline Egan. So I've been obviously in the B2B tech industry for a good few years now, but on many different sides of the fence, really. So I too have been an entrepreneur. This is my second business. I sold the first one, but I've also spent a number of years both in large corporates, but also I've spent the majority of my career in startup high growth organizations as well. So sort of been through that startup scale up mode a number of times. And in my last two businesses, and particularly again now, working with startups around the world really, and helping them to understand how to go to market. And as you said earlier, you know, there's an element of strategy and planning to that, but also very, very practical guidance on what to do, and love to share some views today around that, and as we say, particularly in this difficult time for everybody.
So thank you very much. I will, I don't know if Gail, you can give the rules, or I will give it perhaps the rules to the people about the Q&A. Yeah, you want to get you can give it? Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. Cool.
I've just had to shut my video down. I'm sorry, because I mean, yeah, it's not working perfectly here today. So I've been putting the rules, writing the rules in the chat area. So use the chat area to just present yourself, share some resources if you have resources to share during the conversation. And use please the Q&A area to ask your question and upvote for your favorites. And then we will select and pick the one depending on the topics where we are talking about, and respond to most of them. Don't worry.
Okay, so I will begin. So you have time to ask a question, but don't wait too much. My first question would be about adaptation. So how to adapt quickly and perhaps cut spending and do a self-evaluation. I think when we are quite early stage founder, it's quite hard to do. We are working a lot and we need to adapt every time, but in such crisis, sometimes you don't have enough people, you don't have like a lot of BP to decide the strategy with you. So how to do your your self-evaluation? So perhaps you can begin about where to cut or how to proceed, Amali.
Yeah, it's a really tough one. And, you know, as founders, all of us are used to anyway working within circumstances where we don't have enough time, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough resources, right? So this is kind of in a way business as usual. But the extreme part is that that's even further squashed, right? Where we're under a lot of pressure. And I think there's sometimes a temptation to almost just deal with what's on fire. You know, what's the most kind of, you know, loud thing which is in your inbox, or the thing which people are screaming about. And I think it really is just to remember at that point to take a step back, to look, if your business is going through difficulties, if you are struggling, if you are worried about things like, you know, your customer, you know, pipeline, you really need to just boil it down to, look, what is going to keep me going through the next 3 months? If that is revenue, then revenue is my religion. For everything that I do, it needs to come back to, is this helping me to drive, you know, new customer acquisition, or help me to deliver to what I've already meant to be delivering, so that I don't lose any revenue from that. And in a way, everything else has to be put to a side as, you know, good things, important things, but just not things that you can concentrate on at the moment. It is worth, I think, going through that process physically. So sit down, you know, sit with your leadership team and just work out, you know, what's in play, allocate where the responsibilities for those critical areas will sit. And then I think the other point, which is around, I guess, communication and motivation during a crisis as well, make sure that you have those regular touch points with your team so that you can assess yourselves against those different areas that you're trying to kind of tackle, and just make sure that everyone has a sense of moving forward with things. Because I think this is one of the other things which I was chatting to someone about yesterday, which is the most dangerous thing I think at the moment is it's very easy to feel like we're all on Groundhog Day, like we're all just going same thing, same day, you know, another day, and nothing is moving forward.
I think we all feel that, yeah.
You know what I mean, exactly.
I know what you mean.
Exactly. And it is that, you know, how can you, in a really weird, stressed environment, create a sense of momentum, that you are moving forward, that even when doors are closed to you, that you have other options that you're pursuing, and keep that, write that down on paper, assign people to it. And, you know, even if it's something as simple as, you know, putting some post-its on your wall next to in your home office or wherever it is, and keep going back to that as your truth and what keeps you honest, to make sure that you're kind of keeping to move forward with that.
Thank you, Amali. So I think we are talking about having a strong focus. So perhaps, Caroline, you can help us to choose the right focus.
Yeah, I think I'm working with lots of startups, you know, and I see this anyway, generally, but I think obviously particularly more in the current situation around focus, is that actually, particularly if you've got a solution or an offering which goes across many industries, it's easy to you know, to be trying to look at many different potential customer target groups that you would be going after. I'm a massive believer, and particularly in times like this, is about really truly focusing on the customer segments where you're going to get most traction. Because yes, you might be able to sell your offering to several different industries. You might be able to sell your offering in several different business use case scenarios. But where do you have best option to do that? Which of those markets, particularly at the moment, are suffering most in the current situation? Which ones are going to emerge more quickly and more strongly as we come out of lockdown and come out of the situation that we're in? So I would add around focus is re-look at your target segmentation of your customers, focus even more and overlay that with those organizations that, okay, they may absolutely, there are many industries, let's be honest, that aren't affected by the current situation today. There are a few which are obviously doing well, but not as many as we'd all like. But there are some that are suffering today that are going to come out even more quickly than others. So have a look at what those industries are and retain your focus, because that's the ones obviously that are going to drive you the revenue and the opportunity earliest.
And I think just to add to that, and Caroline, you probably see this as well. We're having a lot of conversations with our companies around pivoting, right? And quite understandably, in some cases, like, we've got an amazing company in our portfolio who do products for offices, right? And if you had told me 6 months ago, would I have had a conversation with the founder there and told her that the fact that her proposition was based on people working in offices and that was a vulnerability to their business? Of course not, and yet we are here today with that being the situation. So quite understandably, in some cases, there is that, actually, I've lost all of my traction. I've lost my customer base. How do I pivot? But I think, going to Caroline's point, the more dangerous thing is to panic pivot, right? Where you are basically just grappling at anything. And because of that, you're spreading your focus too widely. You need to be really targeted in that approach of, if this is what we really need to do, who is going to be buying? And I think getting into that mental state of the buyers as well. So understanding, who from a purchasing sort of perspective, what types of buyers are actually open to conversations, who's actually having conversations, how do I make sure my propositions align well to them? That's a really important part of that.
And we have, I think, a great question from Eva about that, about, I think, strategy pre-corona and after and post-corona. So she asked us, can you say something about go-to-market strategies that are developed pre-corona, and what and how to change it to present time? Should a startup postpone go-to-market? I think it's not only about pivoting. Perhaps if you are really early stage, perhaps you need to wait a little bit to see and not panic. What is your thoughts about that, Amali, perhaps?
I mean, I'd go to Caroline for this as well, but my view on should we wait to go to market would be probably no, actually. Not necessarily that you need to do a sort of a launch where you put huge amounts of money in detail, but there will never be a good time. The world is always changing, right? And I think the only thing that you need to be conscious of is, if you do launch now, will that proposition still be valid in 6 months' time, in 1 year's time? But I don't think there's ever a point which is too early to get customer feedback as far as, does this product have legs? Is there interest? Because that process of honing your messaging, of honing your product, of seeing, understanding your customers, that's a gradual journey. And I think to wait, it's almost a, when would be a good time? It's never really a good time. You just have to jump anyway. I don't know, Caroline, how would you feel about that as well?
Yeah, no, I think that's that's a great point, and I think that there are different stages of going to market, aren't there? I think, which is what you're saying effectively, Amali, as well. There are different stages, and I'm a great believer that obviously you need to have an extremely strong value proposition when you're going to market, and you're only going to be able to get there by constantly refining it, and that might be by going out and talking to lots of very targeted prospects or friendly people that you can go and talk to absolutely refine that message. It doesn't mean to say you're going out with some big bang to market necessarily, as you said, taking lots of time, energy and money to do that. So I think doing that still at this point in time is still an incredibly valid point. Clearly, it also depends on the markets that you're targeting at the moment. Yeah. There is a difference on the different markets that you're going to. The other thing, and we'll go on to talk a bit more, I guess, around the partner and the channel piece in a little bit, but yeah. I think as well, understanding the influencers to your customers that you're going to target and doing your due diligence and work around those is something as well that I would highly recommend that you do, pre-corona, but also even more important now, because if you can work with potential organizations out there that already have access to your customer, are already trusted by your potential customers, then that is a great way for you to help to accelerate an access to a market, and also intelligence about a market as well. So there are lots of things you could be doing around that even now. And perhaps in some cases, I've certainly seen this at the moment, those types of organizations actually have even more time at the moment to have those conversations than pre-corona. So, you know, there are some benefits, albeit a few, but there are some benefits out there that we can pull on at the moment.
Thank you very much. So we know that we need to be focused, perhaps really make a segmentation of our market. Okay, we know the new people we need to reach and the customers, but we know also that companies are taking a longer decision. We were talking about people really fearing to lose their job, but also we are working from home with the kids and all these situations. So we have an increase of complexity of the sales process. And usually we say that almost 7 people are involved in decision process. So I would love to hear you and about, and first, my first question will be, do we need to focus on acquisition or fidelization? So we need to have customer for that one, for sure, for the first question, Amali. And then we will talk about how to reach the new customers and the methodology you can really, and even large corp. So Amali, you come from Microsoft, and I think it's something you can give us as a good tips to reach people at the moment. So first question about fidelization or acquisition, or perhaps both, but I would love to hear you about that.
Yeah, it does slightly depend on, I think, the stage of your company. So if you have obviously a long pipeline of existing customers who you still have to deliver to, you do need to, you know, shore them up. And I think there's a difference there also between, you know, it might be that in you know, other times where you have more time and that, you know, you're under less pressure, that you can do a lot more value adds. I think with existing customers, it's about delivering well, but also just, you know, delivering, I think, sort of lean, you know, effectively and really to the point, and just making sure that you keep them happy, that they will continue to pay their invoices, and that you obviously continue to develop a good relationship with them. There is an importance of considering what your future pipeline looks like. And if you are obviously fortunate enough to be able to generate all of that from your existing customers, fantastic. Focus there, you know, generate sales through that side. But I think if you are like many businesses, you know, you need to have a mix of both. I think it's worth keeping in mind that sales cycles, as you mentioned, Caroline, are much longer at this moment in time, right? And there's still quite a lot of businesses, enterprise clients, who will be thinking, okay, you know, is this where we want to go? Do we want to take a risk? And I think especially when we're talking about buying from startups and scale-ups, do we want to take a punt on buying from early stage companies who, you know, rightly or wrongly might be perceived to be less stable within current environments as well. But I do think that it's important to still continue that if you can, you know, afford to do that, because obviously, like we said, it's going to take time, and you need to start planting those seeds for the future as well.
Yeah, Caroline, you want to say something?
Yeah, just to add to there, you know, I think the nurturing is really important of pipeline as well. So, you know, you've got obviously the existing customers, as Amali said, you know, where you're looking to build new pipeline and opportunities. And hopefully most of you will already have, you know, some pipeline that's already there. Okay, it may have stalled, but don't forget to still continue to nurture that. That's really important, because most of these opportunities haven't gone away completely. They have just delayed. And if you don't continue to nurture those opportunities, you may lose them to your competition. So there are lots of ways that you can do that still very economically. You know, through things like social selling processes, through LinkedIn, and you know, communicating directly with them if you're able to communicate with them via email and things like that. So there are still ways in which you can do that. So don't think all of your pipeline is on hold and, you know, you need to go back to it in 2-3 months' time. Remember, you've got to continue nurture it. And actually, you can use this time maybe to go more widely to the particular individual that is the contact point for that maybe pipeline opportunity, and start to engage some of the other stakeholders in those companies. Because as Caroline said, the number of stakeholders we have to sell to in any opportunity now is growing. So take that opportunity to build up the momentum within that opportunity around other stakeholders in the business. That's something else, you know, I would definitely say as well. And going back to the point around startups and being seen to be less stable, I mean, yeah, that absolutely, that is the situation, and certainly when we talk more around the partnering and the channel piece in a moment, there is an extremely important part they can play in that, to support and help you in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your point around sort of partnership shells, where you're working with select partners to do that, that's one of the key things, which, is absolutely a benefit when things are good anyway, but particularly at times now where if you can work with a partner who will sort of, as a halo effect of your relationship with them, help instill trust in you as a startup or a scale up to buy from, that's a really, really important thing. And I think, I know we probably, we won't go into it in full detail, but I do think there are some very clever things which people can do around marketing and promotion, as far as the advertising side as well, during a crisis like this, because, we're working in a situation where, there's either a lot of noise or there's zero noise from people. So there is an opportunity to take a much larger share of voice than you might have been able to in normal circumstances. But thinking about that cleverly and how you can kind of execute that is obviously important.
Yeah. And I would add there as well, around that voice, remembering that there's importance to have a balance around that voice, around thought leadership as well as selling. So I would certainly advocate, and I advocate this from, I don't think you're ever too small as a business to do this, is to get snippets of thought leadership out there which show that you understand your market, you understand your customers' pains and challenges, without overtly selling yourself, because you're doing that anyway. You're showing credibility. So, one of the things I would definitely say at the moment is also be very focused on getting that message out there to your audiences. Use that away as well as nurturing your prospects, as well as, retaining your existing customers.
And perhaps we can talk a little bit about, even we have small staff, how to motivate your team. We are all working in remote now. That's kind of adding complexity to motivate them. We have a lot of uncertainty. Amali, do you have any tips to keep the team motivated? It's an hard time. We can give the vision such as usual. A founder say, yeah, I'm seeing and now we are just like that. And even you don't want to panic. You don't know about the market, and even Warren Buffett. So we are like that. Warren, what are you doing?
It's a really tough one, right? And I'm conscious of the fact that, when we're talking about motivation is about feeling a sense of accomplishment, right? It's about feeling like you can get somewhere, that you can, work towards something. And I think that's the bit which, with current climates and the fact that we're all working from home, we see the same four walls, we see the same people every day. That's the bit which we've lost, from not going to a workplace and not having that kind of contact. So anything that, you can do as leaders of businesses to instill that sense of goals, of achievements, of, feeling that there is some sort of way to continue moving forward, I think is important. And tactically that can be, both things like, including those, make clear goals, have clear expectations, make sure you communicate how your company might be tackling the current circumstances, thinking about even including things like, learning and development into, your monthly cycles. So, have a learning day or something where, again, people feel that they can continue to move forward with things. And also just with your clients, remembering that they're going through a similar type of thing as well. So anything that you can help them to keep that momentum going as well, even if it isn't always with projects which are revenue generating. It might be that you do a little bit of co-marketing, or it might be that, you do a webinar together or something like that. Those kinds of things can just really help to feel that you're still able to build something despite the current circumstances.
Yeah. I also think one of the other great advantages of the current situation is, whether it's with colleagues, and particularly also what I find with my customers and my new prospects, is we all have a new norm in the way in which we work with each other, because we're all working from home. People are more open, people are more personable, I find, generally at the moment. So I think there is a good feeling of satisfaction around that, and working with your staff as to how we can further develop that even after this situation. And personally, I find myself, I found myself through this whole situation actually being even much more effective in my time management. Actually, I've gone back to using a pad and paper, which I haven't for years, which is great. And it's giving me a great sense of achievement in the way in which I'm doing things. And I'm trying to coach that through my team and everything else. So it is sometimes the smaller things that keep you motivated. So yeah, absolutely agree, Amali.
Just sort of a quick final note as well. Don't forget to celebrate the successes that you do.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, this is something which we do anyway when we're in offices, but is even more important at home, which is to just make people realize, make them feel proud of whatever they've done, but also just to share those successes with the team so that people can see, okay, there are still people achieving things as well.
Yeah, that's really a great advice. We will come perhaps to more precise strategies and channel strategies. And we have a question from Jessica, real estate founders. One of the issues we are facing as a startup is also the lack of available staff during this time. And the budgets are really tight. Do you have any recommendation to continue B2B relationship when we are understaffed, particularly when the bulk of the work is falling on few people? So I think it's a good introduction for this for the session about more tactical advice from you, Caroline, and just you can give us some advice. So, of course, during this crisis, but with few money, few possibility, so I give you now the voice about.
Okay. First of all, I'm making the assumption there, Jessica, when you're talking about B2B relationships, you're talking about partnering relationships rather than customer relationships. So answering it in that context, building effective channels to market. Or working with partners can obviously, it can be quite time consuming in normal times, in any time. So I totally respect the fact that this might be something that organizations are thinking now, do we do less of that now? How do we do that when we've, particularly got less staff? Well, I think it all goes back to focus again. I mean, I think that, you have to work out which of those potential partnerships you have really have got opportunity in the short and the medium term, and thinking about what is important to you. And also of those relationships that you might have, think about, because typically in partnerships, their partner will be focused on a particular type of customer. So always work back from the customer is my perspective. Always be customer centric in how you think about a partnering strategy. So if you're in a situation at the moment where you've got a number of partnerships ongoing, look at those partners, think about the customer or the type of customers they're selling to, and which of those type of customers are more likely to buy at the moment, are more short term, are the best customers for you, and work back from that. Because even if you've got the most engaged partner, if they have a customer base at the moment, in retail or in particular sectors at the moment which are going through a difficult time, they are not going to get the traction. So always work back from your customer audience that you're selling through. So that's, for me, is a big thing around prioritization with partnerships. There are some, I think in some cases, where you might want to put some partnerships on hold, where they were fairly early stage, and you might want to actually say at the moment, okay, let's actually have a conversation about that partner, and let's just agree consciously at the moment to put this on hold for a couple of months, whatever it might be, because we both have other priorities, and let's go back to it. And I think making a conscious decision like that is a really important thing to do, because then both parties know what the situation is. Generally, I don't think people are going to have a problem with that. And you can consciously go back to that in a very positive way at the end of that period. So that is something else that I would certainly recommend. But it does obviously depend on the stage that you're at. But then again, my view is at the moment that partnering, actually, if you've already got partnership relationships going, they can be an excellent way for you to accelerate the time to a market. They already have the relationships in place. They already have that trusted advisor position. So actually, that is a way of you scaling more quickly. And to the point that was made earlier around marketing, it's really important at the moment more than ever to amplify digitally your message. So think about those third parties that you can work with that are going to help you to scale that message, rather than you purely having to do that yourselves.
Yeah, and perhaps we can talk about we are talking about cutting the expense on marketing, but you were talking about social selling. Ads are not so expensive now. Yeah. Perhaps it's a good move to do. Yeah, what do you think about that? And even Amali, join the conversation. You feel free to give
I mean, I would echo everything that Caroline said. And I think, you know, thinking about, I guess, the situation here from Jessica, I guess, you know, I can imagine you probably had a team of, you know, who are doing reach out, maybe aligned to specific clients. You maybe don't have all of those team members active at this moment. So the process is then to, as Caroline mentioned, to reassign who are your sort of priority clients across a much smaller group of people. I think that point around, you know, having a positive and sort of, you know, grown-up conversation with your partners around, you know, we want to, you know, we really want to keep the relationship going. Also, just wanted to let you know that our team is smaller than it used to be. So, you know, you might hear a little bit less from us, but we would love to obviously, you know, keep in touch. Let us know when things are happening. And in the meanwhile, these are the things that we would love to be able to continue to do with you. And I think even for those, you know, those partners where you're not sort of actively sort of doing a huge amount of a relationship with, it can be really simple things like, you know, sharing your, you know, a little update or something like that on what you've developed, or, you know, inviting them to, you know, a webinar session that you might be running with other clients or something like that. So there are lots of things that you can do which are just, you know, completely free, small amounts of work, which can keep those relationships warm. And also, I think in some cases, you know, just you know, have that conversation with them to understand where they are, you know, because you never know, you might be surprised. Maybe they've got some sort of active client who you've never heard about where you can help. But I think that point about being upfront and just saying, you know, we think, you know, we're guessing that you're probably going through a bit of a tricky time as well, and we're on a slightly shorter team. So, you know, would you mind, is it okay if we both sort of agree to touch up, you know, get in touch again in a month's time or something like that? And in the meanwhile, this is what we would love to do with you. I think that's always a nice way to have that conversation, rather than just ignoring them not just hearing about you. It just shows that you care, but it also shows that you're going through issues like any company is at this moment, and they'll be empathic to that as much as, you know, anyone would be. You know, we're all going through it.
Yeah, and I've seen some great situations at the moment as well, where companies have had conversations with their partners openly and saying, in the current situation, actually, is there something in our value proposition that can specifically help in this current situation? I've seen some great ideas and little task forces which have been set up around those conversations, and sometimes some really great creative ideas come out of that. So yeah, you know, reach out and say, what can we be doing together? Because everyone's looking for ideas. And I think sometimes, particularly some of the partners that may have quite a big customer base, sometimes they are feeling at the moment, although they know that perhaps they're not able to sell so much to net new customers, what can they go back and talk to their existing customers around? And you might be something they can go back and talk to their existing customers around. Okay, it might not mean that they buy tomorrow in the current situation, but it might be something you spark an interest in, they want to understand more about, and that becomes a pipeline opportunity for you later in the year. So, you know, I certainly think that's a great opportunity, and I've seen that work incredibly well in a few areas at the moment.
Yeah, perhaps we can come back to social selling and perhaps content strategies. Not so expensive, but we need perhaps to keep this expenses. We were talking about that yesterday.
Yeah,
Caroline.
Yeah, so I would say, you know, particularly I'm a great fan of what I call content strategies and plans. So, and by that I don't just mean developing bits of content and throwing it over the fence in an ad hoc way. What I mean is that, and as I said earlier, you know, you can start this any stage of business by just deciding what is the key message that you want to get out to your audience, and then producing very simple content. And getting that out there on a regular basis. And by simple content, you know, it could be as much as a point of view that you put around a third-party article on LinkedIn. It could be a white paper that you've created, but, you know, you're probably only going to create one of those every few months or something like that. And then once you create it, you can dissect it into 20 or 30 different pieces and use it in lots of different ways. Or it could be a short 2 lines testimonial from a customer that you've heard, but getting messages out there which are balanced against what I'd call that thought leadership credibility message that you want to get out there, to a message which is overtly selling what you're doing. And the ratio I normally look at is 8 to 1. So 8 pieces of thought leadership content to 1 piece of selling content. And when you're selling, you're typically going out and you're asking them to join a webinar, or you're trying to establish a one-to-one connection with them for a conversation. So certainly that's one of the things I definitely would advocate at the moment. And there are so many creative ways you can create content which don't cost you any money. I ran a workshop recently with a group of companies, and I think we got to something like 65 different types of content you could create. And the majority of those weren't heavily designed or anything, just simple.
We want a list, Caroline.
Yes, maybe.
Here's a list of the 55 contents we can do without money.
Thinking creatively.
That's a great content for us.
Even tips like, even things like, the top 5 things that you might want to think about if you're if you're wanting to buy a solution like this, or whatever it might be, or the top 5 things you might want to think about when your staff are working from home. And obviously you'd be including things in there which lean well towards the solution that you're offering. So it's just being creative about how you position it, really. As I mentioned before, I'm a massive fan of LinkedIn social selling, which is used often by sellers within an organization to use LinkedIn as an approach to engage prospects remotely. There's an etiquette around that. Most people tend to try and go directly for the "we want a meeting" type approach, but no, you actually have to nurture that conversation. Value. So, and whether you're using basic LinkedIn or whether you're using, the Sales Navigator, you can use that in different ways to different levels of value. But I certainly would look at, and online there's lots of opportunities for you to look at the more detail, the etiquette in which you can do it. But certainly for any startup, I would say, look at how you can do that properly. Look at how you can ingrain that within a smart selling approach that you can take, going out to individual target clients and also going out to groups of potential prospects that you want to engage with.
Yeah, sure.
I think just to add to that, and almost to continue on with that point, Caroline, you mentioned about your ratio of, I think it was 8 to 2. I think
8 to 1, yeah.
8 to 1. And I think that, especially at this time, coming across as tone deaf is something you really want to avoid, as far as, the last thing you want to do is to come across as either selling opportunistically at a time of crisis without understanding what pain people are going through. So that point around communicating empathically and considerate to the current circumstances is really important. And actually, I'll post it in the chat, but I know our ads team actually did some really nice sort of bits of info around sort of marketing with purpose and sort of ideas around sort of how do you approach that from SMEs and stuff as well. So I'll send that to everyone. But it's so important just to make sure that you're really thoughtful about your messaging. You craft that really carefully, and when you're thinking about those thought leadership pieces, you want those to talk. Whatever you're creating, see them as this is your capital, right? This is, you're giving people advice in the same way that we're having this conversation. You're helping your clients, you're helping your customers to add value to their businesses. So how do you communicate that to them clearly so that you're helping them? That's the whole point of thought leadership. Yeah. It's not around just promotion.
Yeah. There was a statistic recently that said that 92% of business decision makers still need to be educated, and they want to be educated. They're not saying they know everything. So absolutely, to that point, it's great to get that rapport going with them. And there's lots of other stats that around that say that a very high percentage, I think it's 74% of business makers end up buying from the first person or company that shows them real value add. Another thought, it's how do you get that value across? It's not about your product, your features, etc. It's about the difference and the outcomes it's going to make for that prospect.
We have more, so 10 minutes more. So if you want to ask questions, it's now. We have 2 more questions, so I will ask them now. So from Clémence, do you have any advice about pricing strategy? I'm providing consulting strategy for SMEs, the most impacted segment at the moment. I've been asked to lower my rates because of the COVID impact. Should I do it or it is risky?
Yeah. I think if I could actually reference something which I remember one of my directors told me early on in my career, and that is that you need to remember that how much something costs and how much something is priced at are 2 different things, right? How much something costs is how much does it actually cost you to produce something. So you make a pen, how much does that manufacturing cost? How much you price it at is a strategic choice, right? So this is, you can price it at a loss, you can price it at a profit, you can price it to cover even. It depends on what you need. And I think going to that point around, should you reduce your rates? It depends on what you need. If revenue is a big problem for you, then despite the fact that they are asking you to do that, it's not something you can do, because then effectively you are paying them to work for them, right? To provide a service to them. If it is something which your business can absorb and you have profits in there, which, you might say, okay, on this occasion, for this purpose, yes, I'm willing to do that. That's something that you can move forward with. But I do think you need to be careful about, number one, if you do opt to do something like that, make sure that people are aware it's an exception, make sure that people are aware where the beginning and the end of that is, and also for you to make sure that, you have an out from that. Is this worth you investing your profit margin into? Do you feel that you're going to get something back?
Yeah.
No, that's a great answer. I mean, I think the bit I would add to that is about containing it. So, if you may choose to do it for 1 or 2 customers, contain it. And the other thing I would say, which I think is, just a little bit on top of what you were just saying there, Amali, is do they understand your value to begin with? Because, to your point around the price and the cost, totally 100% agree with that. And it's what people perceive a value at. And sometimes people look to reduce price because they don't understand the value. So you also have to ask yourself, do they understand enough about the value that they're getting? And if it is an issue for them around their short-term cash flow and everything else, you can choose to do that. But again, do that on a very contained basis. Or alternatively, share an element of the risk over time together on that process. But certainly agree with the end point as well.
Yeah, and I think, depending on how much, time you want to put into this as well, there might be an opportunity for some clever bundling around sort of mutual gains there, because it might be, and sort of mutual gains theory is all based on the idea that, you don't always go 100% into other person's territory, right? You rejig the offer. And in some cases, what you are offering as a sort of a way to counter the lack of being able to decline a price might be some other value add, right? So it might be that you can say, you know what, at this moment in time, unfortunately, we just can't lower the price, but we can do this, this, and this. Can we add something else to that, which makes it a more valuable proposition to you? And therefore you're more likely, or it could be something, like bundling. So you could be saying, actually, yes, we're willing to do at a price, but we'll make the assumption that it's not 1 piece, it might be 3 pieces over the next 6 months, and we'll offer that price to you as a bundle deal as well. So again, trying to, I think going to Caroline's point, make that value proposition more attractive. Sometimes just rejigging the proposition a little might help you to not have to reduce the price too much, but still give you that benefit in the end.
Yeah.
And conversely, if their cash flow is really an issue, what you could do is the opposite of that as well, is do restricted use of something. So if you have a product rather than a service, and I think the question was probably a bit more around a service, but if you have a product, you can do a restricted use license of what you have. It has less functionality, it has less capability, which you can upsell later. That's as well another strategy for you in the short term to keep things going, but allow you further down the line to add additional value and drive additional revenue.
Ladies, I will ask you the last question and I will do a double in one. So from Victoria and Renee, because we have only 5 minutes, so we need to be efficient. So the first question, I think the both are about the next months. We don't know. We will have other waves of Corona. We know that now. So when we are talking about focus, pivot, business decision, can we ask that we will have a moving target? And perhaps for the other question, and how to deal with that, with these moving targets? Until when? We don't know. And then the second one, so we need to be efficient. It's about the industry. We are really in trouble now. Tourism, advertising, we are not investing anymore in the campaign. They know our value proposition, but where should the money come from? Which industries can spend money these days? Microsoft, perhaps? No? So first question is about moving target and then talking to the more profitable companies and industries.
Yeah, and I guess quickly to those points. So my view would be, as far as moving targets, yes, you need to be agile, but don't be over agile. And what I mean by that is there are just ups and downs, and it's almost like looking at, I don't know, a stock chart or something. You need to look for the average line, right? So do sort of think about what is likely to happen in a general sense, and do consider, you know, how things might need to change. But I think trying to over adjust for just daily fluctuations in things, you'll drive yourself crazy. So, you know, think about, go back to, you know, who will my customer be in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time? You know, keep that as your truth. And ultimately, you know, a product is only as good as people are willing to buy it. So, you know, you really just need to think about that kind of going forwards. Thinking about, I guess, the money type for events, you know, where should money come from? So that, I guess, is that question more around who's advertising or who's paying for advertising?
Yeah, I think so. I think Renee is running, investing in campaigns. So yeah.
There are companies, and I think it really reminds me of when I go down to my local high street, right? And when I see the shops out there, half of them are closed and have signs saying, you know, we're not going to be open for business. Other half of them have queues going around the block, right? Who is buying at the moment is very polarized. And I think there are definitely companies, tech companies, you know, Microsoft, a lot of the other companies who are operating are doing, in some cases, you know, and look at those specific companies. And even within companies, sometimes teams are buying, even if not the whole business is buying. So it's difficult to sort of say a general who's buying. Best thing is what would be true even before the crisis and will be true after the crisis. Speak to people, have conversations, get to know your customers, because they'll be able to give you those directions.
We have only 1 minute with Caroline before she goes. So Caroline, the last word for you, and then we will have time, Amalia, to say goodbye to everyone. So I will keep you a little bit.
There are some reports out there. I'll try and see if I can find a couple of links and post them on of which are some of the industries at the moment that are doing better than others and do expect to come out more strongly than this. I think in answer to that question specifically. So you know, we can, you know, I think to me at the moment the ones that I think are doing better than some others are maybe telco, obviously. Actually, areas of public sector are having to invest and progressing and getting on with things. I'm seeing that. Regulated industries like utilities, they're still having to move and move forward. So I think there are, and also the other thing, I'm a great optimist, and at the moment I see and hear all the time that one of the things I think for us, most of us generally in this sort of technology world, is I think this whole situation has shown us is that those organizations out there that are taking advantage of tech can be more agile, can respond more quickly, adapt supply chains, do all the things they need to do to make sure that they can cope in a situation like this. And we are all aware that this isn't probably going to be one wave. There's going to be potentially multiple waves of this. So I'm a great believer at the moment. I'm certainly seeing some great shoots of hope out there. The companies that are actually recognizing that to survive, they have to invest in great technology. So if this is a market I would rather be in than any other at the moment, if I'm honest, So I'm going to leave on a positive note.
That's perfect. So thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you, Amali. We will share the resources after, and so thank you very much for being with us today. It was really interesting, and we have a lot of people with us. So thank you. Just a word, and if Caroline, you want to go, you can leave now.
Yeah.
You are free to go. Just a few words for the next session.
I'll say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Caroline.
I've got to be somewhere else.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. So yeah, we will have another session next week with Anna Feldman about navigating with as a parent worker in tech during this situation. We perhaps will continue to do homeschooling until I don't know when, but it's my case. She built a great startup called Kidadle, and she will be with us to talk about the entrepreneur journey, a fundraising process, and all the great advice she will give us as a parents worker in tech. Thank you, Amali, and thank you to all the Microsoft for Startup teams. You want to tell a word about Microsoft for Startup, perhaps, and what you are doing as an accelerator?
Yes, very happy to. So yes, Microsoft for Startups, we basically support B2B software businesses. So if anything that you folks are doing is involving sort of B2B businesses where you're working with technology, do check us out. I'll put it in our chat as well, but the website, if you just go to aka.ms/startups, you can actually find more information about that as well. And we are continuing to invest in companies. We are continuing to support them. A lot of the stuff that we do is around obviously supporting companies to build their technology, helping them to actually do go-to-market approaches with co-sell and partner sales and that side of things. So do check us out. We'd love to have some of the people here joining.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amali. So see you soon, everyone, and stay safe, and good luck for the end of the lockdown. we are really happy to have you with us, and we can continue the conversation on the platform, and you can match with people, and we will share all the resources with you. So bye-bye. See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.